Ever worked in a 6-foot cubicle farm with overhead fluorescent lighting? Kind of like in the office? I have. You have a very different sense of well-being there than if you have open access to hang out with your peers, where you have space, view, access to nature, natural light. You feel differently, which ultimately makes you do things differently. I was born in the heart of Seattle's Central District, a historically Black community. My mother, who grew up in the CD, as it was called, knew that my sister and I would struggle in a neighborhood that was under-resourced. It was difficult for a Black family to have a leg up. My parents wanted a better life for their kids, which meant two things: a zip code where the mean average household income was twice what it was in the CD, and access to a college track education in a public school system, the only one they were going to be able to afford. So we moved to the suburbs. What did my parents gain for the move to white suburbia? Well, my sister and I did well in school. We both graduated college. We got well-paying professional jobs. What did my parents lose? Connection. Direct, day-to-day connection with people that looked like us, cooked like us, felt the same connection of soul music, had the same way of speaking, identified with the same cultural references, had the same worldview. The apartment buildings that I grew up in on the east side felt like storage units for humans. When I walked home from school, I entered a huge asphalt parking lot with parking stalls as far as the eye could see. Rows of vinyl-clad buildings that looked like oversized Lego blocks spread across the urban landscape. No differentiation, no distinction. The only way to tell my building was to find the 6-foot-high letter C and then navigate myself to our family's unit, C101. These cheap woody walk-ups, as they were called, 3-story apartment block developments, were plentiful throughout all of suburbia. My family would reside in one for a number of years and then move on to the next one and the next one. They were entirely indistinguishable from each other, interchangeable, modern versions of affordable housing, the modern slum. This physical environment only elevated my lack of connection, my lack of sense of place. We did not know our neighbors. We had no place to gather as a family or as part of a community. We often had no yard, no garden, no relief from the sprawl, no beauty. I'm forever indebted to the sacrifices of my loving parents. This is not any criticism of their choices or their hopes for me and my sister. Instead, it's a reflection that environment has a profound impact on how you view and experience the world. For me, that lack of connection was fundamental in shaping who I am today, a Black architect working to foster community and connection. In college, I studied architecture at a school as far away from white suburbia as I possibly could get. That community in St. Louis, what I learned was that there was an even greater wage gap than where I grew up. One of those communities, the former slum of Pruitt-Igoe, was a classic example of the failure of urban renewal in the 1950s. The idea was that people lived in large towers and freed up the ground plane for fields of green. In practice, what Pruitt-Igoe really became was a failed experiment of high-rise, racially segregated, poverty-stricken, affordable housing. Ultimately, Pruitt-Igoe was torn down in the 1970s. Similar to how I grew up, those containers for humans did not contain environments where people felt connected to the land, to each other, or to themselves. And when you feel disconnected, it's nearly impossible to care about, maintain, or invest in the hard shell that is your container. This can easily turn into feelings of resentment, anger, fear, or neglect. It was this disconnect that I shared and felt and that drove me to authentically identify with the Black, Indigenous, people of color community that I wanted to serve as an architect. What I know as a community architect is that design of our built and natural environment can either tear communities apart or bring communities together. In the mid-90s, I returned to my home to create a space that would celebrate Black community in the Northwest. The site was a mess, a neighborhood torn apart by a highway expansion with a long vacant school and a park that was underutilized and vacant. We started with a community visioning process to truly determine what mattered to the community that we wanted to serve. Now, more than a decade after it opened, the Northwest African American Museum at the Coleman School is still going strong. It has served to knit the community together and create a space where people belong. Physical space can unlock pride. Another project that brought together community was First Place Schools in Seattle. They served homeless kids, and in doing so, providing them education and providing them a safe space that they otherwise didn't have. I had the opportunity to design an environment to provide the things that I was not otherwise afforded in suburbia. In the Central District, my parents knew their neighbors. They could hang out on the front yard. They could sit on a stoop and talk. This place needed to promote community. It started with a small housing development called Amani Village. It was built immediately adjacent to the school. It provided outdoor classroom space for the school and 16 units of affordable housing for families that were part of the program. In her famous book, The Death and Life of Great American Cities, Jane Jacobs talks about how when people have windows that look out onto the street and onto shared outdoor space, they're more likely to look out on their windows and be a part of keeping the street safe. We designed this project to make certain that we created that same experience. The project was designed to look like two large residential homes. People moved from the unprotected space of the street through a portal between the two homes and into a shared courtyard populated with flowering trees, adorned stoops, and play equipment for the kids. Each unit's entry and windows look into that shared space, and people have a shared experience that allows them to build community, allows people to commingle and get to know their neighbors. In doing so, we created a sense of home. When built spaces ignore community, the cost is high. 2 years ago, I was asked by a majority white developer to assist them with a project that they had lost their way. Their goal was to develop 430 units of residential housing on a prominent street in the Central District. 2 other projects of a similar type had already failed the Black community on that same intersection. The developer did not understand the community's values. The project was not being developed in a way that was celebrating Black culture and history. The Black community decided that enough was enough and that this white developer was coming into their community and taking advantage of them. The city of Seattle responded by saying that the developer could not move forward with the project until this disconnection was addressed. I was brought in to help reestablish the conversation and invite more faces to the table. The difference between involving the community from the start and coming in late was that we still had big boxes on the site. However, we were able to incorporate 8 Black artists into both the design of the physical buildings and the site, and through that collaboration between the Black artists and the developer, we are able to now see and celebrate the brilliant Black history and culture of the Central District literally cast on the buildings of this project. The project includes a courtyard internal to the city block, which features a huge outdoor gathering and performance space with a beautiful life-giving tree as the centerpiece. The space will be given life by African American marketplace, small businesses, retail, and art galleries that populate all of the spaces that wrap the courtyard and also spill out onto the street. In partnership with Africatown Community Land Trust, the city block will offer almost 250 units of affordable housing for families. Last summer, in a neighborhood in Seattle, there was a single space that embodied community and a need to heal. Capitol Hill was overtaken by unrest. The Capitol Hill Organized Protest, or CHOP as it came to be known, came together to celebrate culture and have their voices heard. Cal Anderson Park was transformed by the Black Lives Matter movement and a groundswell of community members engaged. They wanted to make a difference for themselves, by themselves, despite hardship. After the dust settled and the CHOP was no longer occupying the city streets, we convened a series of public open houses, online surveys, and small gatherings to ask stakeholders at every level how we create, own, and occupy public space. Marcus Henderson of Black Star Farmers built a community garden in that public space of the CHOP because people crave connection to each other and to the earth. He answered that call by creating opportunities for families to plant vegetables and grow their own food to be more connected to both the soil and to be able to commune with each other. By re-envisioning the physical environment in the public realm, Marcus created community. We're expanding on that promise by creating new gathering spaces for community conversations, public art opportunities, and expanding the opportunities for food-producing garden spaces on the site. We'll enhance the public realm with clear and open lines of sight, better lighting, and community policing that will allow neighbors to feel safe, to gather, and to celebrate the culture of their community. All humans have a right and responsibility to invest in their built environment to promote social change. Imagine what would happen if we all had our own version of Cal Anderson Park. Architecture is an expression of who we are as a culture, what we hold up on high as beauty, what we believe is important to invest in, and how we treat our people. Without holding ourselves responsible for that personal investment in our own future and that of our community, we will continue to erode the social structure that have supported our sense of well-being. We will not nurture our cultural center, our sense of place, our sense of home, our sense of connection. The built environment, not just the buildings, but the way buildings are designed to create open and gathering space, can provide a stronger connection between the community that lives there by celebrating history and celebrating the culture of the people that live there. In this way, we can create a renewed sense of connection and celebration. I've seen it happen, but architects alone are not the answer. From public officials down to small business owners, down to residents, everyone needs to participate in the process to celebrate and come together to create a space where we can all belong. Right now, we're a nation disconnected from ourselves, from each other. We need to come together to create spaces where we can be together and feel a sense of belonging, both psychologically and physically. Thank you.